Reborn from the Cosmic Womb. A Near-Death Experience report by Mira from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation.org. My name at the time was Arti, and I was a very successful financial consultant. When I had purchased my white 560 SL Mercedes convertible in 1988 or 89, can't remember which year, these words had popped into my head. You will die in this car. Of course, I didn't give any credence to this thought at the time. But today, after almost 6 years, those words seem to be repeating themselves to me. Just before death, July 30th, 1994. That morning I had driven about 400 miles with my secretary from San Francisco for a couple of meetings with some clients. For some reason throughout that day I had been feeling somewhat uneasy, like this was a premonition of sorts. So I had been in a quiet prayer mode the whole day. I had been invited by one of my clients in the city of Glendora for their 80-year-old mother's birthday celebration. Afterwards it was almost 11:30 PM by the time I was able to call it a day and leave for the hotel. I had thought that I would tell my secretary I was extremely tired, and it would be better if she was the one to drive back to San Francisco after the birthday party. As destiny would have it, I was so tired I forgot to tell her, while very mechanically getting into the driver's seat. Seatbelts were not mandatory in 1994. Without bothering to put on my seatbelt, I started the car and began driving. After about 10 minutes on the road, a car with 2 young boys was driving in the left lane. Suddenly it swerved to the right, coming into my lane right in front of me, then stopping abruptly at the stop sign that was just ahead. I had nowhere to go, so I slammed on the brakes, or so I thought. In my immediate shock and sleepy exhaustion, I had pressed down on the accelerator instead. The 560 SL is designed to go from 0 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour within seconds, and that's just what it did. I shot forward at full speed, and crash. In that moment of impact I felt my whole body lift up, fly forward with great force and hitting something. Next thing I knew, I was seeing this white stream of light travelling inside my body, which also filled with a brilliant electric white light. It looked like light travelling in light. As I looked at this moving light energy, I realised I was also experiencing it. This powerful white energy which was moving from my solar plexus towards the top of my head. I was moving very fast, yet simultaneously I appeared to be moving very slowly. Somehow it seemed very natural for my movement to be slow and fast at the same time. Was I in perfect balance? There was no sense of duality. I knew that this light energy was my prana, otherwise called life force. The prana was moving upwards through my body, almost as if being pulled by some sort of magnetic power above my head. Just then I experienced a sinking feeling, very much like one feels when beginning the plunge down a roller coaster. I felt myself go into a gentle convulsion with an upward movement. The next moment, it was all gone. There was no light, no body or anything. It was the strangest feeling and yet so familiar. It was as though I had experienced it many times before. Without the body, I found myself floating in a dark void. I was totally confused as to where I was and what was really happening. All I could see was total darkness everywhere, but I wasn't afraid. At a distance, I saw a pale golden vehicle-like thing in the shape of a small boat. The boat was brilliant in its golden hue, and it was coming towards me. The centre hollow portion of this golden boat seemed to be filled with that same shimmering, brilliant white light I had seen inside my body. As it moved closer, I could see in the centre on its bed of white light that there was a very ethereal human body. The body was lying very still on its back, draped in a pale golden gown and glowing gloriously in the dark night. It was a magnificent sight to behold. As it came closer, my entire being went into shock when I saw the face of this body. It was me. Oh my God, I realised. I'm dead. I was completely jolted by this truth. I looked at myself for the first time and saw I had no body. I was just a spark of light and was now linked to this sparkling boat. Almost immediately, the golden boat tilted upwards with the feet of the motionless body pointing upwards and head below it. The boat transported me faster than the speed of light, almost like a thunderbolt slicing through the dark night and disappearing into the void. Almost as if I had fully woken up after a long sleep, I found myself surrounded by an all-pervasive brilliance. There was no boat, no body structure, no dark void, nothing. There was only this dazzling, electrifying, brilliant white light all around. The light was everywhere. There was nothing except this brilliant consciousness. It seemed to have a consistency of the ever finest, minutest electric-like sparkles, and was energetically similar to the bed of light I had come on, except that this light was all-pervasive and limitless. It could perhaps be compared to the light of thousands of brilliant stars reflected in millions of sparkling diamonds, all-encompassing, self-luminous, and pulsating with electric energy, very delicate and smooth. I seemed to know that the light was the supreme infinite light that is God, the cosmic consciousness. It is truly impossible to describe in mere mortal words this pure love, this vital energy, this infinite light, this supreme absolute consciousness, this presence which is commonly referred to by most of humanity as God or the Creator. It can only be experienced. So please forgive my humble effort with limited vocabulary to try and share what I experienced. At this moment I was literally standing on air and was an electric body of light. I was in this dazzling white void, this brilliant nothingness filled with comfort, delight, and a deep knowing that I had reached my final destination. I seemed to know that this was the ultimate white effulgent light, experiencing myself as a shimmering, sparkling white light energy, pulsating with some kind of ethereal, ethereal, electric life force. My being was flooded with a gentle, very expansive love energy. The energy was like a soft embrace from that all-encompassing light presence. This light presence of pure, unconditional love seemed to be in me and around me. It was all-pervasive and extended into infinity. Strangely, there seemed to be no difference between this light and my light being. Even more bewildering was that this conscious loving presence seemed to be the nature and substance of all of existence. In sheer delight, my light self was almost skipping in the air as a further wave of knowing passed through me. I whispered to myself, "This is the real me." In complete wonderment, with a sense of déjà vu and awe, I heard myself say, "I know this place. I know this place. I've been here before. I made it. I finally made it back." Drinking in the nectar of the loving presence which enfolded me, I saw with complete amazement a very interesting transference starting to happen. There was a string of atoms starting to flow out from within the left side of my electric body, and they disappeared upwards into nowhere. Almost as if from thin air, a much finer frequency of atoms seemed to be appearing, and were entering through my right side into this same electric light body. I was watching and experiencing at the same time, again with no sense of duality. My entire being was being totally emptied, refueled and reprogrammed with this ethereal, orderly interchange of atoms. I saw that the new entry was made of a vastly different energy and seemed to have a much more expansive and delicate DNA energy. It had a new wave of very lightweight, subtle cellular frequencies, as they spiraled in, expanding and changing the previous electric body formation. All of the above was happening very fast, and yet seemed to take an eternity. Enfolded in the comforting wrap of pure divine love during this cellular exchange, it seemed as though I was gradually disappearing with the atoms leaving this electric light body. Almost as if another me was birthing through the newer, finer atoms entering into this light form. My whole being was cleansed and purified, making it ready for its next role in God's divine drama. I wished to take a final look and say goodbye to the world I had just left behind. I looked over behind my non-existent shoulder, somehow expecting to see my world, but to my complete shock I saw that there was nothing there. My earthly world didn't seem to exist. There was no world, no universe, no galaxy, no earth, nothing. Nothing existed except this soft, conscious presence, this pulsating brilliance, this pure love that was everywhere as all pure white light. Oh my God, how could that be? I exclaimed to myself. Where has it gone? What about all I went through as Arti? It was all real. How could it have just disappeared? A gentle response seemed to come from the cosmic wisdom that was all around. But how could it be real when it has just disappeared? There was so much knowledge that was shared with me that I can't share it all here. The response said, "What is real is only that which is permanent and changeless. That which changes is within the mirage of time, and truly non-existent. Consciousness, however, as a gentle, delicate, smooth, flowing process is ever present, even within the human form, above and beyond the mind, as it is the experiencelessness underlying all experience. It never changes, never disappears, and it is therefore the only reality." I asked, "But if this consciousness alone is real, the world was an illusion? Then where did it come from?" It replied with, "Like all manifestation, the world too is the creation of the great illusion or great delusion, which being the creative aspect of this supreme consciousness, or the Lord, is the divine movie projector of life, in the all-powerful play of the realm of creation. Just as a mirage in the desert disappears when viewed from a certain perspective, your life as Arti on earth has disappeared, when viewed from the perspective of the divine self, where you are now. Only the eternal is real, and from the viewpoint of that reality, all that is non-eternal disappears. Yet of course, you, being eternal Atman, the soul, can still view the world of illusion if you wish." I asked, "So my life as Arti never really existed at all? It was an illusion?" It replied, "Oh, it existed, but just as a dream exists, or a movie, or a mirage." I continued questioning. "So the world was just a figment of my imagination? How did I create it? With my thoughts and desires?" The reply echoed all around me. "Yes," as it reverberated within my being. Yes, I understood now. The world had all been only in my mind. A thought and senses created illusion and delusion. Without the senses, mind and body, there was now no ego to perceive the world illusion. It had all existed and happened only in my mind. Our true reality exists outside of the mind, which is where I was at the present moment. I realised the true vastness of my being and the minuscule nature of the cage of the earthly body. The roles I had played through the many lifetime dramas with different bodies flashed again into knowing. I smiled, seeing there was absolutely no attachment whatsoever to any of them. How could I, when it was just a play of mind? I had come to terms with the fact that once I, my ego consciousness, left the body, my mind-created world also disappeared. Universal laws seemed to unfold rapidly and poured into my entire electric wave body. I realised that the real goal of the mind-created life game was to remove the veil of delusion and ignorance and reach the ultimate truth of one's reality in life itself. This truth, this self I was bathing in and which had encompassed my being, was nothing but love. The truth was love. Pure, unconditional, universal love that is almost non-achievable in human terms. It was the fabric of this consciousness of which I was part. Yes, because love is God and God is love. It was very clear that the cosmic composition was made up of nothing but love. Love is the God glue that is holding all together. I realised I was not just inside the love, but rather one with it. This universal body of love, of God. This was completely natural to me, as flame is to fire because it is fire. This was home, and I wanted to be here forever. Immediately with the emergence of this thought wish, the ego wave that was Arti seemed to gracefully meld into the Supreme Presence, dissolving into that ocean of love. Arti as the earthly Arti was no more. An incredible wave of freedom splashed over my being, almost like coming out scrubbed fresh and clean after a long overdue bath. The cellular interchange of atoms with their spiralling exit and entry had stopped because reprogramming of my electric light body was completed. I was birthing a new life later known as Mira S. I knew without a doubt that life on Earth was just a playground of experience, an assignment from God, a mirror projection of the divine. In each new lifetime, as the soul makes spiritual progress, its vibrational frequency gets tuned to a faster, higher, and finer level depending upon its degree of evolution. The transformation continues until the frequency level is fine-tuned to such a degree that it connects with the frequency of the cosmos itself, which then allows it to gain entry into cosmic consciousness, one's true self, which is eternal bliss, otherwise known as Ananda. In the light presence, everything and anything could be readily created or manifested. It was in the nature of this supreme presence. Everyone and everything, anywhere, was right here where I was, present in the seemingly invisible now. One just had to think and it was available. The transmutation within my electric body being completed, the electric body too, was no more visible because there was complete oneness. It was infinite to such a degree that I was no more, and yet I was that consciousness. There was nothing else and no other. Oh dear God, that is all that exists, the only being that is. That consciousness was all around, inside, outside, above, below. It was everywhere, the all. As one touched by the philosopher's stone, which is said to transform iron into gold, I had gone through a complete transformation and transmutation of the previous self into birthing a new higher self. I was bringing with it an immediate awakening into the knowing of universal truths and the reality of Supreme Self. This magnificent, all-pervasive effulgence was so glorious. It was true. There is only one being, one God, and that is the true self of all. All are just a reflection of God. All are that one. I too was that one. That is my reality. I was brimming, overflowing with the supreme knowing that the Supreme Being is my own true self, my true identity. It was here, now, and always. There is no past or future. It is all happening constantly in the now. Losing it all, dissolving. I am that I am. Achman Brahmamsi. I knew that I was, and I am all there was to know. Just like myself, all of creation wherever and however it existed, whether human, animal, mammal, plant or nature, all were full in themselves. All were and are God, a beautiful, glorious expression of that same fullness. Creation was just divinity experiencing itself through its creation. I was bathing in consciousness, as consciousness. I was enjoying this bliss of union with the absolute divine self, God, and full with wholeness of being. I wanted only to remain as this cosmic being forever. I never want to be separate again from this oneness, this all-encompassing love. This was my feeling as a faint memory of the world of separateness wafted into my consciousness, and anxiousness seemed to take over all of a sudden. I heard myself repeat twice, "Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?" By the formation of destiny, which is created by our actions and reactions, the newly transformed being of myself now in existence, having received a downpour of higher truths and realizing its higher self from having merged in oneness with it, I knew that it had been brought within and as the pure energy of that one, of pure white light for a reason, so an element of wonderment was there at what might be coming next. Much to my dismay, however, the all-pervasive knowing came through with a much different response than what I was expecting. Coming loud and clear, it reverberated through that infinite space of consciousness. You have to go back. You have to do the work. Communicating that my real work on earth was to begin now. I called out, "Please, I don't want to go back. I'm very happy here." But the Lord Supreme Consciousness had spoken, and it had to be. Right then, I saw a long, flexible kind of tunnel which almost looked like a huge hollow umbilical cord. I could actually see the outside and inside of it. Inside it I saw the form of an unborn human baby, with golden light-coloured skin, curled up like a fetus against the inner wall. So this is the cosmic womb tunnel, I thought. It seemed to be coming from infinity and spiralling downwards. But as I looked at it carefully, I exclaimed in alarm, "Oh no, not again," when I realised that I was that baby, speeding down head first, as the curled up fetus in this cosmic tunnel-like womb. I was crossing the dimensional barriers. I thought, "Oh God, oh no, I really was going back into Earth consciousness to be reborn." Next thing I knew, I heard myself let out a cry. I had opened my human eyes. They were looking in the rear view mirror of a car at a mouth bleeding profusely with the whole lower face covered in blood. In a complete daze, feeling totally disoriented, I touched the face in the mirror and realised it was my mouth. I thought, "Oh God, I have a human body again. I really am back." The lower gum bone had been broken and lay flat on my tongue. The 4 lower front teeth had come out of their gum sockets, but were still held by their nerves as they sat on my tongue in the middle of the mouth. Upon touching my face, I could feel tiny particles of glass from the shattered windshield all over my upper face, and even my eyelashes. But none, not one, had entered my eyes. Miraculously, despite this gruesome injury in my mouth, I was feeling no pain whatsoever. There was no physical feeling at all. Such was the amazing divine compassion of the Lord. It seemed God had sent me back with the powerful anaesthetic of his all-pervasive cosmic energy, which was keeping me unaware of any pain. I was still consumed within the awareness of that bliss of cosmic consciousness, his pure love energy, and still immersed in that glorious realm of light and that oneness. Body consciousness had not yet set into my awareness. I was still very disoriented, much like an alien in a new place. I was not in touch with the human senses at all. Turning to my right, I saw Arti's secretary in the passenger seat. She seemed to have had a concussion and was moaning softly in pain. Since she had her seatbelt on, she was unhurt except for a few bruises. Wanting to wipe the pouring blood from my mouth, I seemed to see without seeing, as I automatically reached into the back of the side pocket of the car door and pulled out a napkin. Gently wiping some of the blood from around my broken mouth, my mind wasn't thinking clearly. I was perfectly calm, almost as if all was well and that nothing was broken. Trying to open the car door, I found it jammed. Since this was a 2-door convertible, I reached over the other seat, opening the passenger door and climbed over the secretary, squeezing myself out and finally standing in the fresh outside air. It was a balmy night, with a nice soft breeze that almost seemed to be welcoming me back to the world. I saw a car standing in the distance with 2 young boys excitedly talking with each other. Another car pulled over, followed by bright lights as a police car drove onto the scene. I stood there with a bleeding broken mouth in a total daze, slowly taking in all that was happening outside and inside of me. Soon the policeman came over to me and started asking questions. Since I had no pain and was seemingly unaware of my 4 teeth and broken gums sitting on my tongue, I actually tried to speak, but all that came out was an unintelligible blubbering sound. I then realised how important the gum bone and front teeth are to speech. The policeman just nodded and proceeded to write down notes for a report and said an ambulance was on its way. He then looked in on the secretary, who was still concussed. A lady from the house nearby came running towards me and started asking if she could help in some way. She said that if I gave her the telephone number of anyone that I knew, she would be happy to call them for me. Searching inside Arti's handbag in the car, I found Saroj's phone number, the family from where Arti had been before this accident. So I gave that number to the lady. She went away and then came back again bringing a pack of ice and told me to put it on my bleeding mouth. I put it against my mouth for a few seconds. Realising there was no pain, I felt no need for it, so I handed it back to her, shaking my head. I tried to form the words, "No pain, no pain." "But how can that be?" she asked incredulously. "You have broken bones in your mouth and so much bleeding." I tried in vain to convey the words, "The light, the light." Within the next few minutes, Saroj and some of her family members arrived. The ambulance also arrived, taking my secretary and my dazed self to the nearest hospital. Saroj and her sister-in-law Kamal drove behind the ambulance and came to the hospital also. Upon arrival at the hospital, the staff apologised for not giving me painkillers. They wanted to take x-rays and the medicine would hinder that in some way. But it didn't matter to me because I still didn't need them. No dental surgeon was on duty late Saturday night, so they had to send out for him, telling me that it might be somewhat of a wait. They took me immediately for x-rays. As I was being rolled away, I saw the secretary being rolled to another area. Saroj and Kamal were waiting as my stretcher was wheeled out of the x-ray room and followed me to my hospital room. Very lovingly and meticulously they stood and removed every tiny particle of the shattered windshield glass from my face and eyelashes. Amazing how my sweet lord had taken care to protect my eyes. At this point, my heart was filled with deep, soul-stirring gratitude towards the loving Lord of the universe. More so as I had come down with total awareness of his presence and truth. It was as if the universal supreme consciousness I had been bathed in was very gently and lovingly taking care of every detail of my safe return. It was very clearly with me, and in me even now. After Saroj and Kamal had left about 1 or 2 hours later, the dental surgeon also arrived. By then I had spewed out large quantities of blood in a bowl they had provided. Since my consciousness was still immersed in the joy and bliss of the light, I was still in absolutely no pain. This was a good 4 hours or more since the accident and injury. God was making sure I remained in that cosmic state of blissful unawareness of body, mind and senses, so as not to feel what would surely have otherwise been excruciating pain. What a miracle. It was some kind of divine anesthesia, a beautiful expression of God's boundless love and compassion to keep away the unimaginable pain of broken bones and loose teeth from me. Again, God's hand was quite evident in the form of the gentle dental surgeon who was now standing by my bed. After looking inside my mouth with a very kind and loving smile on his face, he said, "You know, unfortunately there's no dental equipment in the hospital, so I'm just going to have to use my hands and some wire to temporarily fix your gum bone and teeth. Is that acceptable to you?" Looking at the kindness and warmth emanating from him, I felt very safe and nodded. Yes. He started by giving a few anaesthetic injections within my mouth, thinking I must be in pain and would feel more soon. Then with his fingers he proceeded to lift up my broken gum bone from my tongue and gently made it stand in its place. Then he took the 4 teeth resting on my tongue in my mouth, still attached to the gum by the tiniest of thread-like nerve fibres, and placed them one by one back into their rightful sockets in the same broken gum. With some wire he tied the loose teeth to the solid ones, wiring the gum and teeth together. He asked me to see him for intensive surgery on Monday morning. Since his clinic was closed on Sunday, I had to stay wired up like this for 1 whole day and night. Then he patted me on the back for being so brave and left. The bleeding had stopped and I fell off to sleep, but woke up in the morning almost screaming, for I was experiencing unbelievable deathly pain. It was killer pain. I then truly understood the agony I had been saved from for the last so many hours. Such grace. The nurse came right away and gave some strong medication that made the pain somewhat tolerable. What a lesson the pain had given though. My first lesson on my return into the world. Pain was truly only in the mind too. Right after the accident my mind became non-functional, as I was in a state of higher consciousness. There was no experience of pain, for there is no such thing as pain in that state of being. That is a function of the mind and senses. The senses got activated only after I was drawn back into bodily consciousness, and by the painkillers and the doctors working on my mouth and myself giving attention to it. So it was only a matter of where the mind was focused really. As the saying goes, it's all in the mind. In the state of cosmic consciousness, there was no pain or pleasure. There was no duality, as there was no sense awareness. There is only isness. Everything just is. Awareness of higher self is being a love energy of total equanimity and balance, the peace that passeth understanding. It is a deep samadhi-like state, unaffected by anything or anyone. A state of timeless Satchit Inanda, being, awareness, bliss. In wonderment and gratitude, I thank that Supreme Consciousness for allowing me to know this experientially. On the outside, the accident was something terrible that had happened. In reality, it was a monumental gift of grace the Lord had showered, this precious awareness of Atmic discovery. What a gift through an accident. To take a soul, entangled in human trials and tribulations, out of the human realm altogether through the realm of death and into the supreme light, to reveal to it its eternal self, its divine identity, and there unite it with its real self, the supreme self itself. Precious blessing. Then to bring me back into the human realm, whole within myself, wholly transformed by the supreme light presence of pure unconditional love, filling my being with divine knowledge, to begin life anew, as the life divine. For even as I lay on that bed in the hospital, all wired up and smiling contently, I seemed to almost take on a vow. As I knew, mine would be a sacred life dedicated to the Supreme, to be lived in full knowledge of my true being, and compassionate loving service to all He sent to me. With this knowing, a prayer went out from within myself. I would try to stay within that knowing I had received as conscious awareness. I would walk solely on the legs of truth and righteousness, extending compassion to all with the arms of love and non-violence, and try breathing in and out the peace that pervades the whole universe, the peace of the absolute oneness of all. Gradually, as I shared this knowing and moment by moment tried to see and love the God within all, I would surely lead a blessed life and help in spreading that love and truth of who we really are, and the divine power that we all are. The magnificence and pure love and bliss that exist within each and every one of us, and that there is absolutely nothing to fear, especially death, for we are eternal and we never die. That is the core essence of the God Self. Its temporary individual self and all other selves are comprised only of love, love, and love. That God is love and love is God. Continuing to swim in that beloved consciousness, lying on the hospital bed that night, it dawned on me that this is what awareness is. This love, this peace, which seekers of truth here in this world were yearning for. They searched to find that happiness which constantly eluded them. I had to somehow help. That it was my duty to my other selves. After the hospital, Saroj and her family came to pick me up from the hospital that Sunday afternoon. Since I was now back in body consciousness, the excruciating pain continued to be truly unbearable, even with very strong medication. The pain lasted for 5 to 6 days. I went for surgery Monday morning. The surgeon said he either had to remove all the 4 teeth and put in dentures, or at best he would have to do a root canal on all of them. But since the nerves were still attached to the teeth, I assured him that my God would take care of this and to please somehow save the teeth. He hesitated at first, but then agreed, saying it was my responsibility, and I would definitely need root canal work on them in 2 to 3 years. I was okay with that though. It took almost 5 hours for the surgery, where he placed a full set of metal caps and wiring on my lower teeth to help them settle back permanently and allow the nerves to heal. Since the teeth setting was very fragile with a broken gum bone not strong enough yet to bite any solid foods, I was supposed to be on a liquid diet until it became strong. I stayed for a week at Saroj's house to recover from the mouth surgery. I then returned to my home in the Bay Area where I lived alone since I was single. For almost 1 year I stayed on mainly Ensure Plus, which is a liquid food, just like I was a newborn baby. Existing in a very different inner world of my own, it might sound strange, but I was still quite disoriented. Everything seemed new, and I was trying to get used to the world around me. Fortunately, nothing seemed to have truly affected me emotionally. I remembered Arti's life but was quite unaffected by it. My lifestyle was almost the opposite of what Arti's had been. My body structure had also changed. Food preferences were different. For example, Arti didn't quite much care for chocolate and ice cream, but I love it. I had somewhat of a singing voice, whereas Arti couldn't really sing too well. I was more of a quiet personality, wanting to keep to myself. I'm very selective of whom I spend time with, whereas Arti had an extrovert personality and was very happy to be mixing in society, attending parties, public relations, and just generally being social. My clothing choices were a bit more conservative too. Interestingly, people around me would say, "There's something different about you after the accident, but we can't tell what it is." I could tell, of course, but they would never understand. On the physical level, if one looked carefully and compared the eyes of Arti and myself in photographs, they were absolutely different from each other. We were almost like twins, but different. My desire for the world and its attractions was very minimal, as I knew it was temporary and not real. Still fresh from the return and wanting to go back there, I decided to go into a world where I could still be in that consciousness, at least some of the time. So in December of 1995, I completely walked away from the high-end lifestyle of Arti, the successful financial consultant. I gave up the properties, the big house, worth approximately $3 to $4 million today, as well as cars and other material possessions. I then left for India, to the ashram of my spiritual master Sai Baba, which was the only abode of peace I knew. My name was officially given by Sai Baba as Mira S in an interview in 1996. After which, my disorientation with the world seemed to subside to a great degree, as I finally had some identity of my own. I returned to California after almost 5 years in September 2001, on the day of 9/11. It took 5 days to reach America from India. I stayed with my brother and his family as I had given up my home. In 2002 I went to the Himalayas for a few months, climbing up to 19,500 feet in the snow. When I got back, I went to Stanford University for a while to study child developmental psychopathology. I thought I would try to help juvenile delinquent children. Then I opened a holistic store in San Jose for about a year. I closed it and went into real estate for a few years. I started a non-profit, studied at World University, and was ordained as an ecumenical minister. In 2007 I opened a multi-faith sanctuary in San Jose for 5 years, trying to help people who came there. In 2010 I went back to the Himalayas for about 4 to 5 months, meditating in many sacred caves, bathing in many holy rivers. I came back and was divinely guided to close the sanctuary. Since then, I have been spending time in India and the US, trying to finish 2 books. One book is a poetry book of mystical meditations of the knowings which I experienced from the other side. It is almost complete and ready for publishing. Many miraculous events have occurred and continue to occur. I live in wonderment and surrender to that supreme being and his love. Mira S. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all the beings in the worlds be happy. Thank you for spending the time to read this integral part of my life story. Hope you enjoyed that one, guys. That's one of the best things I've ever read out by far. Really touching, emotional and profound story of a near-death experience. Easily the very best I've ever read about. So comprehensive and utterly magnificent in the way it was described. An extreme amount of similarities to the psychedelic experience as well. We're really starting to pin all the dots together now. All of these high-level psychedelic ego-death experiences share so many similarities with near-death experiences. There is truth to be found within this work, and it really is a pathway into universal consciousness. Of course, every person's experience with these chemicals and NDEs are different, but they all seem to be pointing to the highest truth that everything is one, and that we are all universal, unconditional, loving consciousness. If you enjoyed the report, then please consider looking in the description to buy Mira Sai's book, Ecstasy, Standing Inside Oneself. It is a deep, profound look into meditation and the life of the author and how experiences in her life, such as the NDE, have affected her, and it's something that you really should consider checking out if you're fascinated in this stuff, because it goes extremely well with psychedelic work. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed that one, guys. I'll definitely try and get more stuff like this out in the future. I think it's very important to share this with people.